Hi, it's Scott ROCKFILE back with another podcast review for you. This will be my spoiler-free review of the theatrical version of 28 Years Later. I saw this at the first showing on Thursday night. Up until Thursday, they didn't have a Thursday night showing at my local theater, and then all of a sudden on Thursday, there was a magical one, and it was actually pretty full for a theater here. A lot of the Thursday night showings I've been to have had less. I'm a big fan of the first two movies, especially the original. It was like a breath of fresh air back in the day, even though it was filmed, and they made a big deal of it at the time, that it was filmed on consumer-grade 1080p cameras and had a very digital look to it. These days, it looks kind of old, and that kind of helps in its favor. It's been out of print for a while on Blu-ray, but don't go pay a whole lot of money for it. You can get it digitally cheap, and there's a new 4K edition coming out in the UK, so I assume we'll get that as well. The movie has a $60 million budget. As of Saturday, it's already made $14 million. That is about as much money as the first movie made. The second movie did pretty well, too, although for me, it's a lot more forgettable. The first one was just visceral. It was Danny Boyle did a great job. He was an up-and-coming director at the time, and Alex Garland was an up-and-coming writer at the time. Alex Garland's one of those guys now who's one of my favorite writers and one of my favorite directors, even though sometimes I don't always connect with his work. He's still making creative stuff. If you don't know who Alex Garland is, he wrote the original 28 Days Later. He also, as a writer-director, made Annihilation, Ex Machina, and several other really intelligent, interesting films. Again, I don't always connect with them, but, man, Annihilation and Ex Machina are two of my favorites. He's done a few things lately, like war movies and stuff, so it was interesting for him to return to this universe. Also, Danny Boyle, who's done many other things and got to do a lot of stuff in TV. He said it gave him the ability to do some stories and stuff that he wouldn't have had he stayed in like the horror genre and stuff. I learned this on watching a recent version of Dog Soldiers that came out. So I sat down in the theater with my popcorn and my cherry icy and saw a lot of previews, most of the ones I had already seen, and then the movie started. And I got to say, I was right back in the 28 days later kind of mind frame pretty quickly. They go over, you don't have to have seen the first two movies to watch this movie. They go over what happened pretty quickly. A little bit of retcon on the second movie, but not really. I mean, it depends on how you want to go with it. The first two movies were never called zombie movies because they're infected. Zombies technically rise from the dead, and these people aren't dead. They're infected, and they can be killed in normal ways. They're just more powerful and fast and that kind of stuff. And this movie also introduces more than one type of infected person because now this has been going on for 28 years. The UK has been walled off and called a quarantine zone. Nobody comes or goes. Our story begins on an island just off. It has a little bridge that is only available at low tide. That keeps them safe most of the time. And it's a coming-of-age story. Aaron Taylor Johnson takes his son, Alfie Williams, who I believe this is his first thing. His mom is Jodie Comer. We also have Jack O'Connell and Ray Fiennes in this film. Takes him on a journey to get his first kills, so to speak. And he's only 12 years old. And what happens to him and the family and everything else plays out a little differently than you expect. This is not just another 28 days later type of film. Yes, it does have the same kind of infected, but they've expanded on that, and they've expanded on just about everything. Takes a while for Ray Fiennes to show up, but he's one of the best things in the movie. I think everybody does a great job. One of the most divisive things in the movie, people seem to have a problem with the very end, the last couple of minutes. If I had a critique, I would have put that as like a mid-credit scene. We know a sequel is coming. It's already been filmed. It'll be out in January of next year. Nia DaCosta directed it. It's called 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. A lot of the people, anybody who survives in this movie is going to be in that movie. And that's all the spoilers I'm going to give you. Don't go look it up before you see this. And they're planning to make a third one depending on how these two do. Most of the reviews have been good. They're calling it one of the best horror movies of the year, and I would agree with that. But what I consider to be a mid-credit scene that's actually the end of the film, it changes the tone a little bit. A lot, actually. And we'll see where it goes in the next film. But up until that point, I think this movie's well done. Again, they subvert expectations and give you different things than you expect. It still has some of the most intense, quote-unquote, zombie-infected scenes in any movie I've ever seen. These guys created that fast-moving kind of thing, and now they've taken it to a new level. There's also some filmmaking techniques that some people are calling out because, well, the behind the scenes. One, a lot of scenes were filmed on iPhone. It was also filmed with a pretty good drone. But they did some bullet time things using iPhones instead of cameras, instead of regular cameras. And some people have complained they use it too much. I don't think they use it too much. I think it wasn't necessary. I think you could have achieved the same thing, but if they're trying to give a different look, I don't know. It came across as a little too choppy to me. They want to do it faster. It is the kind of Matrix bullet time kind of thing, but it's different, and they're trying to be different. And I don't know. I didn't think they use it too much. I didn't find it distracting, but I also went, oh, okay. It didn't blow me away as something new or spectacular. The whole idea of the movie was something different than I expected. And I got to say, one of my YouTube reviewers kind of gave some things away. They played out differently than I had imagined. But anyway, they were semi-spoilers that didn't always land correctly, if that makes any sense. But I wish I hadn't known his thoughts, so I'm steering around those things. Like I said, Ralph Fiennes, he doesn't show up till late in the movie, but he's fantastic. Really just magnetic in the role, what he does and how everything plays out. It plays out differently than I expected. Even when I knew some of the things, like I didn't know that this was the Alfie Williams' first movie and it was kind of a coming-of-age story. Had no idea about that until like the day I was going to see it. And sat down, and it still played out differently than I expected. So, all in all, to dance around spoilers, not say anything else, it looks pretty great. There's several scenes that look like, oh, yeah, that's definitely an iPhone. The way it's kind of flat or weird looking, digital looking, that kind of thing. But then there's other shots that are just simply fantastic. The way that iPhone sometimes treats like low light things or sunset type things and that is actually sometimes very spectacular. It may not be totally natural or normal, but it does. I mean, I take some pretty great pictures with my iPhone. They used an iPhone 15 Max to film a lot of the parts of this movie. The drone shots are pretty incredible, actually. All in all, pretty impressed with the movie. When I first walked out, I was unsure if I was going to add it to my collection. I was like, I'll wait till the sequel to see what they do. But thinking about it and sitting on it for a day before I recorded this podcast gave me more time to ruminate on it, to think about the acting and how it was put together and why it was put together and how some of the deeper stuff started dawning on me later. And all in all, I think it again, like Sinners, it came out of nowhere to be, wow. Now, they did use that old style broadcast instead of music in the trailer, and it was really creepy. Well, they used that in the first part of the movie. Very glad they didn't use it through the whole movie, because the parts with music I thought were much more effective than the parts where they use sound effects. They do use sound effects in multiple places, video clips, audio clips, that kind of thing, to give a sense of, to me, chaos and stuff in the background. And I think it works, but I also thought the scenes with music were more intense. Really don't have any other complaints about the film. I was actually more than impressed with it. A lot of people walked out of the theater with me, were kind of like, wow, because it's something different. They could have done just a 28 Days Later sequel and just had a bunch of infected running around and a bunch of people ripped apart, and there, you would have been happy. But I think this is different, and what it leads to, I think, unfortunately, that's the biggest complaint people are going to have. It leads to something else. There's more to watch, and they could have ended it. There is a natural ending. They could have faded out on this character who's going on this journey. But then, they could have put the mid-credit scene in to give us a hint of what was coming. But instead, it's just kind of tacked on to the end of where they could have faded out. And it just feels different. I'm not going to say good or bad until I see what they do with it. I actually did think it was people think it's kind of funny, and I think it's a little more grim than it is. But we shall see. Coming up in 28 years later, The Bone Temple, that comes out in January of next year. I would go see this in the theater because it was pretty intense. But if you want to wait for home video, I totally get that. I just don't think it's going to be quite the same. Looked fantastic in my theater. It was also cranked up really loud. So kudos again to the Kenai Cinema, who for the last couple of months have been knocking it out of the park on latest releases. For a while, they had a problem with one of the screens, and they have rectified all problems. I have been thrilled with every presentation I've gone to pay to see lately, and it's different than watching it at home. I have a nice home theater, but it's different watching it in the theater. So highly recommend seeing it in the theater. If it sounds like your cup of tea 28 years later is playing now, go see it and support these kind of movies so they make more of them. At least it's creative. I'm Scott of ROCKFILE. More podcasts on the way. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a spectacular day.